Have you ever asked yourself how someone who once held your face like it was made of glass could replace you like you were made of paper? How they went from good mornings to ghosted, from you're my everything to who's next, so fast it gave your soul whiplash? If that question has kept you awake at 2 a.m., scrolling through their newest post, dissecting the caption, wondering if the smile was real, then you're not alone. But you're also not crazy. You've simply been hit with one of the most misunderstood emotional sucker punches: fast replacement. We're conditioned to believe that speed means strength, that the one who moves on first wins, that silence equals closure. But here's the real talk, the raw, unfiltered truth. Most won't say out loud they didn't replace you because they were over you. They replaced you because they couldn't stand the silence your absence created. And the faster they ran, the louder that silence became. You're not the one who should feel ashamed for standing still and healing. They should be questioning what they're really running from. What if I told you their speed isn't a sign of strength at all, but a symptom of avoidance, a red flag disguised as confidence? In this video, we're not here to beg for closure or interpret their highlight reel. We're here to reclaim the narrative, to take back your emotional leverage. Because Stoicism isn't about pretending you don't feel. It's about channeling your pain into power. It's about self-discipline, not self-denial. This is where Stoic relationships begin, when you decide your silence isn't emptiness, it's strategy. When you learn that indifference isn't apathy, it's armor. And I know, right now your heart might feel like a war zone. The echo of their absence might be so loud you can barely think. But what if that silence isn't there to break you, but to build you? What if their rush to replace you was never a reflection of your worth, but a reaction to their own emptiness? You see, we've been sold the wrong idea that being replaced fast means we were forgettable. But today, we flip that. What if being replaced fast only means you were unforgettable in ways they were too weak to sit with? This isn't about revenge. This isn't about winning the breakup. This is about rebuilding the version of yourself they never had the capacity to value. So let them smile, let them post, let them pretend they're glowing up. Because by the time regret creeps in, and it will, you'll be too far ahead to look back. This isn't theory, this is real-world Stoic transformation. And if you stay with me through this video, you're going to walk away not just healed, but elevated, redefined, and absolutely untouchable. But before we go further, let me ask you, are you ready to stop wondering why they moved on and start focusing on what you're becoming? Are you ready to embrace Stoicism not as a wall, but as a weapon? Because the version of you that's coming next, they'll never get access to again. Let's begin. One fast replacement is panic, not power. They replaced you fast, but you need to understand this. Speed is not power, it's panic in disguise. It's a desperate sprint away from their own emotional wreckage, not a confident step into something better. Ask yourself, if someone truly healed, truly reflected, truly processed the ending of something real, would they leap into something new without taking a breath? Or would they sit with the silence, face the discomfort, and grow from it? The truth is, most people don't replace you because they've moved on. They replace you because they're terrified of sitting alone in a room with nothing but the echo of what they destroyed. They replaced you because the quiet after you left was louder than any comfort they could find alone. And instead of confronting that pain, they rushed into noise, into a new face, a new body, a new distraction. But here's what they don't realize. Distraction doesn't dissolve emotion, it delays it. You don't escape emptiness by filling it with something hollow. So while they post smiles and stage stories, convinced they're moving forward, what they're really doing is skipping the only step that matters: stillness. Real strength, the kind that builds foundations instead of fantasies, doesn't come from fast replacements. It comes from sitting with the ashes and choosing to rebuild brick by brick. But that takes courage, that takes discipline, that takes stoicism, and not everyone is built for that kind of growth. That's why they replaced you quickly. Not because you weren't worthy, but because you were too real. And being with someone real means facing parts of themselves they were trying to avoid. You triggered their insecurities, their immaturity, their unreadiness. You brought truth to their surface, and instead of rising to meet it, they ran. But don't let their sprint confuse you into thinking you were forgettable. You weren't replaced, you were escaped. Escaped like a challenge too confronting, like a mirror they didn't want to look into. Because when someone isn't ready to grow, they don't search for better, they search for easier. And what's easier than pretending none of it meant anything? What's easier than covering up unresolved guilt with new validation? What's easier than performing happiness for an audience that doesn't know the full story? That's not strength, that's not healing, that's emotional immaturity dressed up as confidence. And you need to stop measuring your value based on their weakness. Stop equating their speed with superiority. You were never in a race, you were in a relationship. You didn't fail because they replaced you fast. You succeeded by staying real, by sitting with the silence, by allowing the pain to teach you. That's what Stoic relationships are built on. Not performance, but presence. And right now, you're learning presence in its purest form. You're learning how to rebuild without rushing, without performing, without seeking permission. And yes, it's hard. Of course it's hard. The silence stings, the unknown hurts, the images of them smiling with someone else feel like emotional betrayal. But let me ask you this, do they really look happy, or are they just trying not to look broken? Because real peace doesn't need to be posted. Real growth isn't loud, it's quiet, it's internal. It's the kind of strength that doesn't need to prove anything. But that's not what they're showing you, is it? They're performing, they're pretending. They're painting over their brokenness like a cracked wall covered in wallpaper, hoping no one notices the structure beneath is falling apart. And they're doing it fast, because speed gives the illusion of success. But it's just that, an illusion. What they've built with this new person isn't a bond. It's a barricade, a flimsy wall meant to separate them from the truth. The truth that they didn't finish what they started. The truth that they left something real unfinished. The truth that you, the one they walked away from, weren't someone to be erased. You were someone to be faced. But they didn't face you. They ran. And now they're running even faster into something new, thinking if they go fast enough, they'll never have to look back. But they will. One day they will, because regret moves slowly, but it moves with certainty. It doesn't hit in the beginning. It creeps in through the cracks, in the quiet moments they never post. It whispers in the empty spaces between conversations that don't feel quite right. It lingers in the eyes of someone who reminds them of you, but never quite replaces you. And in that moment, when they realize you never chased, never folded, never gave them the reaction they were waiting for, that's when it lands. That's when they understand the difference between replacing someone and being haunted by their absence. But by then, you won't be where they left you. You'll have grown quietly, relentlessly, stoically, not because you wanted them to notice, but because you remembered who the hell you are. You stopped watching. You stopped waiting. You stopped wondering. You started building. You started focusing. You started protecting your energy like it was sacred, because it is. That's the stoicism they didn't see coming. That's the version of you they'll never touch again. And while they continue to distract themselves, you're developing something far more powerful: presence. And with that presence comes clarity. The clarity to see that fast love isn't real love. That rebound romance isn't recovery. That rushing forward doesn't mean you've moved on. It just means you're afraid to stay still. But you're not afraid anymore. You've stopped feeding your pain with illusions. You've stopped watering dead plants. You've stopped defining your value by someone else's fear. And when you do that, when you fully embrace that kind of self-control, that level of detachment, that's when you win. Not the petty win, Not the Instagram win, the real win. The kind of win that builds peace, the kind that lives in silence, the kind that can't be undone by someone else's story. Because your story has taken a different direction. And the irony, their need to replace you fast, was the first sign that you were never replaceable in the first place. Because people don't replace what they didn't feel. They don't scramble for validation after losing something meaningless. They panic when they've lost something that forced them to face themselves, something that changed them, something they now try to forget by pretending it didn't exist. But you existed, you mattered, and they know it, even if they won't. Admit it, even if they never say it. That knowing will follow them into every new relationship. It will echo in every quiet night. It will sit in their silence, the same way your silence now sits with you. But here's the difference. Your silence is healing. Theirs is haunting. Because you're facing it. You're feeling it. You're learning from it. You're turning pain into discipline, emptiness into clarity, loneliness into identity. You're becoming untouchable, not out of spite, but out of stillness. That's stoicism. That's how stoic relationships are built. Through discomfort, through detachment, through choosing not to react, but to rebuild. And no matter how fast they move, no matter how loud their highlight reel screams, they'll never outrun what you gave them. They'll never unfeel what you brought into their life. They'll never replace what you helped them see in themselves, even if they never had the courage to face it. And that's why they'll regret it, not just eventually, sooner than you think, because they replaced you fast. But they'll feel your absence faster. And when they do, the pain they avoided will be waiting for them. Still, silent, unavoidable. But by then, you'll have evolved beyond reach. 2. The rebound isn't a crown, it's a crutch. They didn't choose better, they chose easier. And that's not something to envy, it's something to understand. See, when someone rebounds immediately after losing you, it's not a celebration of love, it's an avoidance of loss. It's not a sign of emotional maturity, it's a signal flare of fear. You might look at their new connection and think, did I mean nothing? Was I really that easy to replace? But what if the real question is, how terrified were they of being alone? Because the truth is, people don't jump into something new that quickly unless they're trying to bury what they refuse to face. And what they refuse to face is you, your presence, your impact, your absence. They didn't break up and break free. They broke down and bailed out. A rebound isn't a reward. It's an emotional escape pod. It's someone grabbing the nearest warm body to distract themselves from the cold silence that set in the moment you stopped answering. But distraction doesn't equal connection. And pretending you're fine doesn't make you healed. So while they play pretend, smiling wide and moving fast, ask yourself, are they really connecting? Or are they just covering up? Are they feeling something real? Or are they running on autopilot? Because when you watch someone parade around with someone new before the dust has even settled, you're not seeing love. You're seeing emotional desperation wearing a mask. Think about it. Real connection takes time. It takes vulnerability. It takes space to understand your last chapter before you write a new one. But if they're jumping into something new while still carrying your ghost, they're not building, they're blocking. They're blocking the feelings, the guilt, the grief, the regret, the questions they don't want to ask themselves. And that block, it always breaks, because real emotions don't dissolve with speed. They dissolve with understanding. They dissolve with accountability. And if they never gave themselves that grace, they're not ahead, they're behind. They just don't know it yet. But here's the hard part. You'll see them smile. You'll see them post. You'll see them laughing, glowing, flaunting. And that's when the doubt starts to creep in. Was I the problem? Were we ever even real? Did they love me at all? But let me be clear. Rebound love isn't real love. It's imitation. It's comfort food. It's an emotional sedative meant to dull the pain of what they're not strong enough to face. That's not a crown. That's a crutch. You were real. What you brought to the table wasn't cheap, and because it wasn't cheap, it requires reflection to understand. But they skipped the reflection. They skipped the mirror. They skipped the accountability, and what they're in now, it's a performance with an audience, not a connection with depth. So don't compare your healing to their highlight reel. Don't measure your growth against their distraction. Don't doubt your value just because they reached for easy instead of choosing real. Remember, Stoic relationships are not built on noise. They're forged in the silence where truth echoes, and while they are clinging to comfort, you are building from clarity. That's why it hurts right now, because you're growing. You're sitting with pain they're trying to outrun. You're feeling every crack in your armor while they dance around pretending theirs doesn't exist. But here's what you need to know: this isn't a race. There is no finish line for who can pretend fastest. There is only truth, and truth always catches up. When the novelty wears off, when the masks come off, when they realize that the new connection lacks the depth you gave them, that's when the storm hits. Not for you, for them. That's when they realize they used someone else as a placeholder for the void you left behind. But placeholders don't last. They crack under the weight of what was real, and what you gave was real. They just weren't ready for it, and they're still not. That's why they're hiding behind someone else's smile. That's why they're overposting. That's why they're overperforming, because deep down, they know they didn't heal. They skipped, and skipped pain always comes back around. So while they're running, keep walking. While they're distracting, keep building. While they're chasing comfort, keep cultivating clarity. Your path is harder, your nights are quieter. Your growth is slower, but slow growth is real growth. Stoicism teaches us that what grows in silence becomes unshakable. You are becoming unshakable. They are becoming avoidant. There is no comparison. So stop scrolling their pages. Stop decoding their smiles. Stop reading into every quote, every caption, every tagged photo. Their performance is not your truth. Their urgency is not your reflection. Their replacement is not your worth. Your worth was never negotiable. It was just misplaced. And now you're reclaiming it, brick by brick, moment by moment. And every time you resist the urge to react, every time you choose to reflect instead of chase, every time you let silence do your talking, that's power. That's stoicism. That's how you win. Not because they regret you, but because you became someone they no longer recognize and will never reach again. So let them laugh. Let them post. Let them think they're ahead, because when the performance ends and the silence sets in, they'll be left with nothing but the weight of what they lost and the shadow of who you've become. They'll regret it, not later, sooner than you think. Like this video and comment #1 below if this part of the message hit home. Let me know you're still with me. And if you're ready to keep evolving past the pain, hit that subscribe button. We're not done, we're just getting started. 3. Your silence is the loudest message. Silence isn't emptiness. It's energy redirected inward. It's strategy, it's power. And when someone replaces you fast, they expect one thing from you more than anything else: a reaction. They expect the texts, the late-night calls, the quotes you'll post to get their attention, the desperate need for closure that will keep their ego alive. They expect you to spiral, but what they don't expect is the stillness, the total disappearance of your energy, the absence of reaction that suddenly shifts the balance of control. That's when they start to panic, because silence, in the face of their performance, speaks volumes, and what it says is this: I no longer need you to understand me, miss me, or validate me. That's terrifying to someone who thought they still mattered, someone who thought they still had access. You see, when they move on fast, it's not just about numbing their guilt. It's about testing their hold on you. Will you chase? Will you compete with their new connection? Will you try to prove that you mattered? If you do, they win, not because they're better, not because they've found something real, but because they still have control over your emotional state. But if you go silent, if you go still, that's when the control breaks. That's when they're forced to sit with the consequences of their decision. And that kind of silence, it's not weakness, it's warfare, because silence doesn't give them anything to latch onto. It gives them no confirmation that they still matter in your world. And when their posts don't provoke a response, when their attempts to get under your skin are met with indifference, when their energy no longer penetrates your peace, they realize something they never considered. You're actually gone. Not blocked, not bitter, just unavailable. Emotionally, spiritually, energetically, untouchable. And that kind of detachment? That's what Stoicism trains us to achieve. Not because we don't feel, but because we don't need to express every emotion to validate our experience. We learn to hold space for the pain without performing it. We learn to protect our dignity, not by clinging to control, but by releasing it entirely. Your silence isn't a passive response. It's an active reclamation of power. And in a world addicted to reaction, nothing is more unsettling than someone who refuses to engage. They'll start to question themselves. They'll wonder if they misjudged you. If maybe, just maybe, they underestimated your strength. They'll scroll through your name. They'll look at old messages. They might even breadcrumb you, a random like a view on your story, a message disguised as something casual. But it's not connection they want. It's confirmation that they still matter to you, that they're not insignificant, that they haven't truly lost you. Because to someone who never developed emotional self-awareness, silence is louder than any words you could say. It's not absence, it's presence, a presence that says, I don't need to prove anything anymore. And that's when the shift happens. That's when the power tilts. You're no longer reacting to them. They're reacting to you, to your silence, to your lack of response, to the mystery that now surrounds you. And that mystery, that's your strength. Because it forces them to ask questions they never wanted to face. Did I lose something real? Did I mistake their softness for weakness? Are they over me? Or are they finally free? Those questions don't scream, they whisper in the middle of the night, in quiet rooms, in still moments. And the longer you stay silent, the louder those whispers get, until they can't be ignored. That's why Stoic relationships are not defined by drama. They're defined by discipline, emotional discipline, the kind that doesn't require grand declarations or dramatic exits, just presence, just purpose, just an unshakable knowing of who you are without their approval. And let's be honest, it's not easy. Your mind will tempt you to break that silence, to send that one message, to post something that lets them know you're okay. But that's not about them. It's about you needing reassurance. And if you can learn to sit with that discomfort instead of reacting to it, you become untouchable. Not cold, clear, not bitter, boundaried, not heartless, healed. Because you've learned the art of stillness, the power of waiting, the discipline of not flinching. And that's a language they don't speak. That's a form of strength they don't understand. But it doesn't matter if they understand. Because you're not doing it for them. You're doing it for you, to protect your energy, to preserve your peace, to honor the version of you who once gave everything and asked for so little in return. That version deserves closure. And silence, that's your closure. It's your way of saying, this ends with dignity. And nothing disturbs someone more than knowing they no longer have emotional access to someone they once underestimated. That's when they truly feel the weight of your absence. Not when you argue, not when you react, but when you vanish into focus, into purpose, into peace. They can't fake their way through that. They can't spin a story around it. They're left with the truth. They lost something rare, something that didn't need to perform to be powerful. And that truth? It will haunt them longer than you'll ever know. But that's not your concern anymore. Your job is to protect what's left of you, to rebuild, to redirect your energy inward. That's the essence of Stoicism. And when you finally step into that stillness without apology, without fear, without craving validation, you become something they'll never forget. You become someone they'll regret losing, because you didn't just disappear, you elevated. And your silence, that's the echo they'll never be able to mute. For they didn't lose you, they lost the future you. Most people think breakups are about losing the past, losing the version of you they once knew, once loved, once shared memories with. But what they never realize until it's far too late is that the real loss isn't just who you were, it's who you were becoming. When they left, they didn't just walk away from a relationship, they walked away from an entire future they'll never touch again. They didn't just lose the person who stayed up with them during their hardest nights or believed in them when they didn't believe in themselves. They lost the version of you that was about to evolve into something even more powerful. And when people move on quickly, they usually do it under the assumption that what they walked away from has stopped growing. But what they don't understand is that some people get stronger in silence. Some people glow up in shadows. Some people use heartbreak as the fuel to become untouchable. That's you. Because while they were posting their new beginning, you were building your transformation, quietly, relentlessly, with discipline. And now the version of you that's emerging isn't just healed, it's refined, it's wiser, clearer, more grounded. They thought they left behind the best of you. They didn't know they were lighting the fire that would create a version of you they could never match. And that's the part that hits hardest, because regret doesn't strike in the beginning. It waits. It waits until they see you smile, and it's no longer for them. It waits until they realize you didn't chase, you didn't beg, you didn't try to prove anything. You just vanished into evolution. And now, they don't recognize you. Not because you changed into someone fake, but because you finally became someone whole. Someone who isn't emotionally accessible to people who treated your vulnerability like a convenience. Someone who protects their energy like it's sacred, because now you understand what it costs to pour it into someone who isn't ready. This isn't bitterness, it's clarity. It's the realization that growth doesn't mean louder, it means deeper. And Stoicism has taught you that the deeper your roots go, the less wind can move you. That's the version of you they'll never meet again. The one who no longer looks for closure in someone else's inconsistency. The one who doesn't wait for validation to feel worthy. The one who no longer tries to fix what someone else keeps breaking. You were patient with them. You were kind. You were forgiving. And they mistook that for permanence. They thought they'd always have access, that you'd always be an option. But now they're learning the hardest truth. Access is a privilege, not a promise. And when you evolve past the need for closure, for chasing, for explaining, that privilege is revoked. Not because you're angry, but because you've grown. And when they come back, and yes, they often do, they won't be coming back for who you were. They'll be coming back because they see who you've become. But that version isn't for them anymore. That version was built from the pieces they left behind, from the silence they created, from the pain they caused. And that version is no longer available. That's the price they pay for moving on too quickly. Not just losing you, but losing the right to witness the evolution their actions helped create. You became rare, not because they couldn't find someone else, but because no one else gave them what you did. No one else will ever match your patience, your loyalty, your depth. And even if they try to pretend they've found it again, there will always be moments, quiet, haunting moments, where your memory rises like a standard they can't escape. That's what Stoic relationships teach us. Not to chase what left, but to build so strong that even memories of us can't be forgotten. Your transformation isn't a performance, it's a response. It's what happens when someone finally decides they're done shrinking for people who refuse to grow. You didn't glow up for revenge. You glowed up because you remembered your worth. You didn't cut them off to hurt them. You cut them off to heal you. And now, you are no longer the version of yourself who tolerated being undervalued. You are no longer the person who overlooks red flags out of potential. You no longer confuse connection with compatibility. You've outgrown the version of you that settled, and that's the version they'll never meet again. So don't open the door when they knock with nostalgia. Don't answer when they call with confusion. Let the silence speak. Let your growth do the explaining. Because there's no explanation required when someone chose to walk away from something that could have become extraordinary. They didn't just lose the person they knew, they lost the future that person was building, and there's no second chance to witness what they didn't respect the first time. Like this video if you feel that shift. Comment. Number 1. If you're stepping into the version of you they'll never have access to again. And don't forget to subscribe, because this is the kind of growth they'll never be ready for, but you will. 5. Your value was never measured by their speed. Just because they replaced you fast doesn't mean you were ever easy to replace. And if you've been carrying that silent assumption, it's time to lay it down. Let's dismantle that lie right now. You are not disposable just because someone moved on quickly. Their speed is not proof of your insufficiency. It's proof of their inability to pause, process, and face what they lost. People often confuse speed with strength, mistaking motion for meaning. But you and I both know that real healing, real maturity, real transformation doesn't happen in a hurry. It happens in the stillness that most people are too afraid to face. So when they moved on overnight, posting smiles, tagging someone new, acting as if the bond you built was just a placeholder on the way to something better, you were left wondering if any of it meant anything. And in that wondering, it's easy to internalize their behavior as a reflection of your worth, but it never was. Your worth isn't defined by someone else's inability to appreciate it. Your value isn't dictated by their timeline. Your impact isn't erased by their need for distraction. It's easy to think, if they found someone new so quickly, maybe I wasn't that important. But that logic is flawed, because the truth is, people don't replace what didn't matter. They run from what mattered too much. They run from the parts of themselves they saw in you. They run from the accountability that loving you required. And instead of rising to the standard you brought into their life, they chose the shortcut. That shortcut, the rebound, the new person, the rushed relationship, it's not a testament to your inadequacy. It's a mirror reflecting their emotional immaturity. They didn't want to sit with their choices. They didn't want to own their role. They didn't want to look in the mirror and ask, what did I do to lose someone like that? So they ran, they avoided, they distracted. But no matter how fast they tried to outrun the void you left, the silence always catches up. That silence, the one you've been living in, breathing through, growing inside, is the same silence they're afraid of. Because silence speaks the truth. And the truth is, they didn't move on because they were over you. They moved on because they couldn't face what they lost. And the more they try to mask it with filtered moments and shallow connection, the more obvious it becomes. They never processed the loss, they just postponed it. And that delay, it doesn't protect them from regret, it guarantees it. So while they're out there moving fast, convincing the world, and maybe even themselves, that they've leveled up, what they've really done is loop themselves into the same pattern, the same cycle, the same emotional avoidance that will eventually catch up in the most unexpected moment. Because you don't escape the loss of something real by pretending it never mattered. And what you gave them was real. Your love wasn't performative, your loyalty wasn't temporary, your presence wasn't shallow. And no matter how quickly they try to bury that truth beneath someone else's smile, the imprint remains. Because real love doesn't evaporate. It lingers. It echoes. It resurfaces in the smallest moments. The song they used to hear in your car, the food you cooked together, the scent on a hoodie they forgot still carries your energy. That's not something they can fast forward through. That's not something they can erase with a new body. That's not something they can overwrite with staged intimacy. Your value runs deeper than their timeline. Your worth is not something they get to define just because they were too impatient to process you properly. That's why Stoic relationships are rooted in inner stillness. They're not built on reaction or competition. They're not about who posts more or who smiles first. They're about who can sit with discomfort without needing external validation to feel okay. And you, in your silence, in your solitude, in your slow, intentional rebuilding, that's where your value is being redefined. Not in comparison, but in clarity. Not in spite, but in strength. Because when you no longer measure your worth by how fast someone moved on, you reclaim the power they never deserved to hold. That's stoicism. That's the discipline to say, your choices no longer shape my self-perception. That's what they didn't expect. They thought they'd leave and you'd break. They thought they'd post and you'd spiral. They thought their silence would control you. But instead, you used that silence as space to become. You stopped watching their story and started writing your own. You stopped decoding their words and started listening to your own inner wisdom. You stopped trying to prove and started to protect. And now your value is something they can't touch, can't reach, can't measure, because you're no longer offering it up for review. You've made peace with your truth. And that peace, it doesn't look flashy, it doesn't post often, but it's unshakable. So the next time you find yourself wondering how they moved on so quickly, remind yourself, it wasn't because you weren't enough. It was because you were more than they were ready to hold. And that kind of weight, it doesn't get replaced. It gets remembered, quietly, painfully, in the moments they never post about, in the silence that always comes after the performance. That's where your value lives now, not in being seen, but in being felt. And they'll feel it, not all at once, not in some dramatic realization, but in fragments, in flashes, in the spaces their new connection can't seem to fill. That's the cost of fast replacements. They create a future haunted by what wasn't healed. But your future? It's clean. It's whole. Because you took the time to sit with the pain. You took the time to listen. You took the time to grow. And that time, that's what they'll wish they took too. Because while they were performing strength, you were building it. While they were chasing distraction, you were creating discipline. While they were masking the pain, you were mastering yourself. And now you've become someone they never expected, someone they can't access, someone they can't explain, someone they'll never forget. Because your value was never tied to their attention. It was tied to your intention. And now you've shifted that inward. You've become the prize they were never prepared to lose, not because you needed to be chosen again, but because you finally chose yourself. 6. Regret comes quietly, but it always comes. Regret doesn't arrive with fanfare. It doesn't announce itself in bright lights or grand gestures. It doesn't shout, it whispers, and its favorite time to speak is in the silence, after the noise fades. You won't see it the moment they post their new life, or when they smile in their highlight reels. You won't hear it in their loud laughter or staged photos. Regret doesn't live in public, it lives in private, in the moments they can't curate, in the spaces they never post. That's where the truth settles. At first, it seems like they've won. They're loud, expressive, light on their feet and quick to say they've moved on. But moving on quickly isn't a sign of freedom, it's often a sign of avoidance. And what is avoided never goes away. It waits. That's the part no one talks about. The way regret creeps in slowly, like a shadow growing longer as the day ends. It's in the silence after the party ends, in the space beside them that never feels fully filled, in the new person who can't match the comfort of what they lost. Because healing isn't about replacement, it's about reckoning. And when you skip the reckoning, the regret just builds quietly in the background. You were the reckoning they avoided, the conversation they never had, the mirror they couldn't face. And now, though they won't admit it, they feel it in ways they never expected. In the music they used to hear with you. In the inside jokes no one else understands. In the questions their new partner asks that make them pause. Because the answer used to be you. Regret is not immediate, it's slow, but it is inevitable, especially when someone moves on too quickly, too loudly, too confidently. Because that confidence, that's often the armor they wear to keep from looking weak, but armor cracks, and when it does, regret slips in. At first, it's just a thought, did I make the right decision? Then it's a memory, something you said, something they laughed at, something they miss but can't replicate. And then it's a realization, I let go of something rare. That's when it hits. Not when they're surrounded by people, not when they're being celebrated. It hits in the quiet. It hits when your silence becomes undeniable. It hits when they finally understand that your absence isn't temporary, it's transformation. You didn't just leave, you leveled up, you didn't just move on, you moved beyond. And now, they regret not who you were, but who you became without them. Because what they thought was a breakup was actually your awakening. And awakenings don't happen overnight, they happen over time. In every moment you resisted the urge to reach out. In every minute you sat in silence instead of sending that text. In every hour you spent rebuilding instead of replaying. That's where your power was forged. That's where Stoic relationships draw their strength, not in the noise, but in the stillness. You were patient, you let the pain do its work, you faced the void they couldn't, you embraced the silence they feared. And now, while they're just starting to feel the sting of what they lost, you're already rising into the version of yourself they'll never touch again. That's the essence of Stoicism. You didn't break, you rebuilt, you didn't react. You redirected, and now your life is moving forward, not with rage, not with revenge, but with unshakable focus. While they loop through the same emotional patterns, searching for a familiar feeling in unfamiliar faces, you're no longer emotionally available to them. Not because you blocked them, but because you outgrew the need to be understood by someone who chose not to understand you when it mattered. That's what haunts them. Not your anger, not your bitterness, but your peace. Your peace is what exposes their chaos. Your discipline is what reflects their desperation. Your silence is what magnifies their noise. And one day, maybe not now, maybe not even soon, but eventually they'll sit with all of it. All the decisions they made, all the excuses they told themselves, all the ways they justified replacing you. And when they do, they'll realize that it wasn't just you they lost. It was the chance to rise with someone who truly saw them, and that chance doesn't come around twice. By then, you won't be bitter. You won't even be watching. You'll be too far ahead, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You'll be too focused on your own journey, too immersed in your purpose to even notice when the regret sets in. And if for a moment they dare to reach out, to test the waters, to see if there's still an opening in your world, they'll find the door closed, not with anger, but with self-respect. Because you've learned the final lesson. You never needed to be chosen by someone who couldn't choose you when it mattered. You never needed to be validated by someone who was terrified of your depth. You never needed to be explained, fixed, or chased. You just needed to remember who you are, without them. And now you do. You've become unforgettable, not because you posted more, not because you made them jealous, but because you didn't flinch, you didn't play their game, you didn't try to win them back, you just evolved, quietly, consistently, stoically. And that evolution, that's the regret they'll carry. Not loudly, not publicly, but personally, deeply, silently, because the love you gave was real. The time you invested was genuine. The energy you shared was intentional, and now that you've reclaimed all of it, they're left with what they chose, and without what they lost. So if this resonates with you, And you felt that quiet shift happening within, like this video, and comment number 1 to claim the strength in your own silence. And make sure you subscribe, because this isn't just a moment, it's a movement. Your rise has just begun. In the end, this was never about how fast they replaced you. It was about how deeply you rebuilt. You started this journey thinking their speed meant your failure, that their silence confirmed your irrelevance, that their new beginning was proof. You were the end, but now you know none of that was ever true. Their reaction was never a reflection of your worth, only of their unreadiness. They ran not because you were lacking, but because they were overwhelmed by everything you were and everything they weren't prepared to hold. What they tried to outrun became the foundation you built upon. Their noise birthed your silence. Their chaos sharpened your clarity. Their departure was the unintentional gift that returned you to yourself. You didn't just recover, you redefined. And in doing so, you stepped into a truth far greater than any version of the story they told themselves, that you were never replaceable. Not because you were perfect, but because you were present. Not because you never hurt, but because you chose to heal. Not because you chased what left, but because you chose to stay with what remained, yourself. This wasn't just a breakup. It was a breakthrough, not an ending, but an unveiling. The collapse of illusion, the birth of strength. And now, as they sit in the silence they once underestimated, you rise. Not as the version they remember, but as the version they will never touch again. Quiet, whole, unshakable. That's the power they never saw coming. That's the rise they'll regret missing. And that's the legacy you leave, not as the one who broke, but as the one who became.